Welcome and thank you all for being here for this important discussion about private sector leadership in food systems transformation. Very excited about this because I think all of us can agree that unless tomorrow we wake up and there's a new economic system thrust upon us, the private sector is absolutely critical to food systems transformation. Earlier this week, I had the honor of meeting John Kerry, the former US Secretary of State. And I want to quote him here because I think it's very relevant for the discussion we're going to have. He said, "We need to move from moral responsibility to investment opportunity." And he was speaking about the need for us to stop pointing the finger at businesses and actually find the investable opportunity so that we can move forward with food systems transformation. At ATNi, my company, Access to Nutrition Initiative, we refer to the triple materiality of food. That is, we look at food from the environmental perspective, we look at food from the social, i.e. health perspective, and of course, the economics have to work. It has to make sense for markets. So I'm very excited because we have three dynamic leaders, and I'd like to introduce them. Tania Strauss is the head of Sustainable Growth and People Agenda. She's also a member of the executive management team at the World Economic Forum, so bringing to the stage that convening power, the link with Davos, very important, and of course moving with collective action many food companies. Valerie Keller, the co-founder and CEO of Imagine, which is, as you all know, co-creating business coalitions, mentoring leaders, driving leadership for food systems transformation and other sectors. And we also have Schmidt, Senior Vice President, Strategy, Marketing, and Transformation at dsm-firmenich. Hella's driving industry strategy, as well as innovations across supply chains and following up on company commitments. So this first round, we want to really dig into how you're leading by example. One other thing I'll mention before we jump into the question is, yesterday, Professor Linnae Gordon pointed out that there are 3 barriers in the Eat Lancet to potential change. One of those barriers was in fact highlighted as corporate interests. However, we all can agree that corporate interests can be shaped and they can absolutely be a positive force for change. And I think we're going to hear how these 3 businesses and leaders are leaning in, not skirting around the issue, but actually finding solutions for that change. Tania, first question for you. I wanted to understand, how does WEF seemingly successfully move some of the biggest food companies towards that North Star without letting it all spiral down to the lowest common denominator? How do you keep that North Star as the focus?
Yeah, thanks so much, Greg, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to be here in Stockholm, and congratulations to Gunhild and Dr. Rockstrom and the whole group on the new Eat Lancet report. I think it's really important in this time to have this kind of science-based dialogue and action framework. I arrived yesterday from New York, and I walked into this room, and on the screen was a very familiar face, a tribute to David Nabarro, a friend that we've all lost, and a leader and a champion of so much of this agenda. And as we think about what he would want to hear in these halls and in all the halls, is this really important framing of food systems, something he championed when it was out of favor, and certainly something he drove a lot of progress on once it was adopted by so many. And why it's so important as a framing, as an understanding, as a language, because when we understand food as a system, we understand the interconnections and we understand the stakeholders, and we see ourselves in that system, and we have a seat for everyone at the table. That's the difference. We start talking about silos, we reinforce silos. When we talk about collaboration, we need to have an understanding of a sector, a system that is employing over 40% of the people on Earth. This is an economic and societal and environmental issue. And I think in the spirit of how David approached that food systems transformation, I think it is important to think about then the ecosystems, plural, that we need to collaborate with. And at the forum, that's really been a bit of that bedrock and philosophy to say, what are the innovation ecosystems, right? There's a few levers, we need all of them to work together, but in the role of technology, and I'm happy to talk about tech, I'd rather talk about process innovation because the latest tech is not going to be successful when it gets to the delivery model, and we know that from our sector for decades, right? So what does that look like? This year in Addis, days after the UN Food Systems Summit concluded with so many countries and leaders coming together to celebrate both the tribute to David, but also the progress that's been made, we saw the Food Innovation Hub's global initiative recognized as one of best-in-class examples of a co-investment global platform. And the reason I mention that is because if you look at all the other examples that were on that list, they're really big players with really big money. And this is a scrappy little example of an innovation ecosystem that's been working to demonstrate what happens when you bring stakeholders together from the private sector, defined in its widest possible way. Economic agents across the value chain, farmers and producers, SMEs, innovators, early stage tech, national companies, multinational companies, and together with government, science, research, and other stakeholders, creating much more fit-for-purpose design solutions that are helpful, right? And then all of a sudden, digital advisory services and carbon financing and value chain integration, all of that then comes together in a very different way. So yes, the technology is exciting to think about, but it's actually the ecosystem itself, the network of partners that allow us to think about the use of that in a much more purposeful way. Maybe one example I'll give, just because Agnes is sitting right there, and it's exciting to think about some of these ideas coming from farmers, right? So we had a farmer organization in our network in Southern Africa, Sakau, if you know him, Ishmael Sanga, and he said, I want to attract the youth farmers back to this sector. Let's think about a systems approach to poultry, right? That's looking at feed, that's looking at animal health, that's looking at human health, that's looking at livelihoods, and brings youth back into this sector. And now they're working in 4 countries, and we help to incubate that idea through an ecosystems approach. And that feed accelerator, thanks to the championship of so many partners locally, is going to be upwards of like $50 million kind of support to look at micro lending, digital services, and all kinds of things that are supporting that systems approach. And that idea didn't come from, I won't say where, it came from the heart of who wants to be a part of this solution. So I think that kind of flip on the North Star, as you say it, that global alignment translated into local ecosystem leadership that helps really move everyone's role and capabilities together in one direction.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing I took away from that is it's not just about the technological innovation, it's the process innovation and working with multi-stakeholders. And thank you for that really concrete example from the poultry industry. I'd like to go to you, Valerie. I know that Imagine has had a lot of successes, for example, with Unilever, Bayer, and other major companies. Could you tell us more about how you're driving forward those very specific changes and try to focus a little bit more on, what's it mean for food systems transformation in this Eat Lancet diet?
Sure, happy to. I mean, I would say first, Imagine is a global leadership community. So we aren't driving the changes, it's our leaders that are driving the changes, but it's very relevant to the conversation that we're having today and what the work everyone is doing here. We used to call ourselves as a leadership community for impact, and interestingly, the community has decided that leadership by definition is for impact, so we are a global leadership community. But when we first started, my co-founder and I, who may be familiar with many people here, we said, can we help to create a community of leaders, human beings, who come together to partner for systems change? So we see organizations as made of organisms. It's some people, right? So could we bring together the food CEOs across the full value chain? And Paul was interested in food because he was one of the architects of Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously, it has material impacts, as we can see. I was interested in food because it's a universal connector, and it gets into the core of human beings. So what was interesting for us is when we got the food CEOs across the full value chain with, by the way, David Nabarro and the amazing Agnes Kalabata as well, what's interesting is that people were already awake, already aware, wanting to change, and not wanting to be beat up on as we are not part of the solution. The alignment there was on helping them to connect, see each other that way as fellow travelers, as fathers, as one mother in the group at that point, human beings who could want to do the same thing. And they aligned on this terminology, regenerative agriculture. And they say that that was their biggest outcome of coming together, was just the alignment around the terminology. What we saw them from there was we said it's not up to the big CEOs. These are leaders inside companies. So Imagine has curated a group of leaders inside these companies. So when you say Unilever and Bayer, we think Lucas, who is heading regenerative agriculture at Unilever, who connected with Natasha, who is leading sustainability and impact at Bayer. And together, because they are Imagine leaders, and there's this trusted connection, and there's an identity that says those of us who care are a part of putting our business, our entrepreneurship, our investment capabilities to the service of the greater good, when they connected in that frame, they put more hectares under regenerative agriculture than each of them had done in the sum total before. Gunhild partnering up with Hannah, who is the EVP of Arla, bringing together what the EAT work was doing with communities of action, bringing in the farmers. That is an outcome of communities, or as Gunhild calls them rightly, communities of action. So what we see as the opportunity now and next is connection with direction. It's great that we're all connected. And in the food space, you are already a great community. People see each other, you hug each other, it's good to be here, da-da. What was so helpful now is what's now here in this report. This is the direction. Science that can help to mobilize us and pull us together. And I think what is so exciting about this, and I have a personal story I can share if you want to hear it later, but what is so exciting about this is it provides for the opportunity for those of us who do identify as we are leading for systems change to understand that the world is with us. There's a zeitgeist right now around health and well-being and wellness and people caring what goes in their bodies. So everybody who is here, you already fundamentally care about food systems change. What you need to know is you're not alone. The rest of the world in many ways is awake, they care, and they being the leaders inside companies, they being people who are the consumers, the citizen consumers who care too. Was that for me? Was I talking to you?
Was it right on cue?
Was that an amen?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that the real opportunity for us, as I say, is connection with direction, is to think about the task of all of us to do what Gunhild and EAT have done here, which is around bridging people together and using the science as our framework for how do we find each other, creating common language like regenerative agriculture, saying we are up to a healthy bodies and a healthy planet, and modeling that change by partnering together as human beings as well.
Yeah, and thank you for the reminder that it is about people at the end of the day, leaders and the individuals that are comprising these companies, which is, I think, a good segue for dsm-firmenich. I'm often reminded, don't just call it DSM, because I knew it from the DSM perspective for many years in nutrition. I actually lived right next to the Firmenich plant outside of Geneva, by the way, so I do know that part of the business. But Hella, you're driving forward, what I understand is you're calling it the category of one. And this is this idea that you're driving innovation in nutrition, health, and beauty. And this is an integrated approach. Could you say, how's DSM and Firmenich working across supply chains to bring that innovation, not only within your company, but you're also working with your suppliers and also your clients?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So and also we're connecting. So Tania and Valerie and I, we connect also outside these kind of events. So I'm very happy to be part of the community and making the connections. So dsm-firmenich, we merged 2.5 years ago. We actually, let me explain a little bit what we do, because some people don't know. So we make taste and ingredients for the food industry. So for example, the pumpkin spice in Starbucks, that is actually from us. But we also work on sugar reduction, we work on salt reduction. We make cultures for cheeses. So we're really ingredient providers, and we do that indeed in beauty and perfume and beauty, taste, texture and health, and in human nutrition and care. The way we work is actually indeed across all the elements of the value chain, but where we really focus and make ourselves different is actually on 2 points. So first of all, it's really an R&D. So we all see that the current diet isn't sustainable. And we believe, or where our strength is, we play the game where we really want to innovate ourselves out of that problem. And hence we invest a lot in R&D. And we ask ourselves in R&D really the tough questions, like how can we have delicious food whilst also being sustainable? So we don't only look at one of the levers, like only sustainability or more nutritious, because we really believe that food is part of connecting people. We all are actually very much spoiled by very good food, and to promote a healthy diet, we believe that the taste should be uncompromised. So and that's not an easy task. So we invest tremendously in R&D in multiple ways. So we work with ventures, we have open innovation, we have very, very smart people working with us who have also worked there for years, so they really have seen patterns of innovation. So that's the R&D part. Secondly, we do our own consumer insight studies. So we really have first sight insight on where the trends are going, where we really look at different cultural trends. For example, GLP-1 is one that we discovered early on, because we really want to tap into the needs of the customer while changing them to eating more nutritious and healthier. So those are the two areas, the research and customer connect, where we focus on the value chain. And of course, we set ourselves sustainability targets, where we look at sustainable sourcing, and other things around the value chain, but the key, our key differences are R&D and consumer insight.
Fantastic. So we've just been looking at some really concrete examples from 3 different companies, leading by example. Now I'd like to talk about how the 3 organizations represented here are actually working with those outside of business, so in the broader ecosystem. I think, actually, I'd like to go back to you, Helle, because you were talking about R&D, and I understand you have 2,000 scientists, 700 euro invested, right, 700 million, thank you, euro invested annually in research and development. Now, you're at the forefront of science here. How are you then translating that to not those in your supply chains, but actually, I don't know, policymakers or maybe academics or others, to make it work for DSM?
Yeah, it's. I would love to say we solved it. We haven't solved it yet. It's a lot of talking and keeping the dialogue going. So to make an example, there's one product. It's called Bovaer, which helps the digestion of cows. So the methane production is actually significantly reduced, like 30 to 50%, depending on which cattle. And this is a golden solution. The question is, it comes at a cost. Yeah. And then you really need across the system to sit together and say, hey, we have an additional cost. It's not necessarily beneficial for the farmers or for the dairy companies or for the consumers, because they don't know when they drink a cup of yogurt or a quark how much the CO2 emission was. The way we then do it is really talking across the value chain and keeping the dialogue open. We, as a company, we consciously choose to focus on transforming the diet. That's where our strength is, and facilitating the dialogue. I have to say that with the recent trends in the US, where we really try to make American healthy again, we see when there's for example, now there's a ban upcoming for the azo dyes, which is an artificial color. Right. The Fruit Loops in the US are actually the most colorful in the world. But and actually, when you have a change in regulation like that, actually the next day the phone is ringing from our clients. Can you please provide a natural colorant? We have it on the shelf, and yes, it's a bit more expensive, but now they are willing to accommodate it. So I have to say these system changes, high level, help us enormously to bring new products to the market.
Sounds like it became an investment opportunity for you.
Yes. Yeah. With the challenge, I think, like our diet is a lot now based on sugar, salt, and fat. Those 3 elements are actually very, very cheap to make. Yeah. And for us, if you want to go to a new, for example, we have a stevia sugar, which is much more healthy than the sucralose that sits in many in lots of our diet. And actually, with sucralose, it's not biodegradable. So if we eat a lot of that, our oceans will become very sweet over time. But we know it, but we don't do anything about it. The challenge is because the current ingredients are so cheap, and actually we like them. Have a donut, it's lovely, but it's really not good. If you want to improve it, immediately the cost goes up, and that is a big challenge. And therefore, we need the systems solution.
And we really appreciate what the Eat Lancet has said on this issue.
Yes.
Fiscal policies have really been put in there squarely.
Yes.
Let's make sure we're taxing
we need
those things
that
which
support.
need to be taxed.
We need that support. You need an accelerator there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can I build on that?
Yes, you may.
I have a quick example for it, if I may. what was super interesting was this example you gave around Bovaer, right? So I know we're talking about bringing in the broader ecosystem, which is, I think, super important, and I can speak to that in a second as well. But within the Imagine community, we saw that by bringing together a leader from Friesland Campina, Dustin, with a leader from dsm-firmenich, who were both nominated and curated, who found each other as human beings. They came back and said, you know, after we had spent time in Oxford learning and growing together, after we had danced on the dance floor, after we had then workshopped, what are we going to do for the collective good, we then went back and accelerated a partnership that it had taken our team 2 years in conversation and weren't getting anywhere, right? So I think what is super important is how simple these things can be. You can accelerate the adoption of new technologies that go for systems change by us putting people together without waiting on the regulatory environment and on the external stakeholders and saying, oh, if only they would change that law, then we could. And so from an Imagine perspective, we, of course, when we had the full food value chain together, we spent a lot of time. We brought in Frans Timmermans when he was in that role at the EU Commission, et cetera. And the Imagine community is comprised of business executives, like those that I've mentioned here, disruptive innovators who have the new technologies and the new innovations and the amazing tech that I agree with you is also about the processes that need to go forward, and the investors, but also civil society and activists. So the Rockefeller, the woman who leads the food work, et cetera. So it's super important as you think about even what EAT and Gunhild has modeled here is putting together communities that comprise the system of human beings who can then partner together to make the change happen, but without waiting and saying, oh, if only they would change that, because we don't have time.
Very good. And we'll come back on the examples. I would like to go to you, Tania, next. You're doing a lot on livelihoods and food, really making sure that that particular aspect of employability is looked at appropriately. What are you doing with, say, non-businesses to really make sure that there is fair wages, good livelihoods, employability in the food system?
So I think I want to answer that in two ways, right? Because business is also not just one homogenous group. I think we are really used to talking about the food systems transformation within the agri-value chain from upstream to downstream, but we need help in that upstream to downstream to manage the contracts and the process and the procurement and the finance and the technology. And there are sectors out there, and I know we had all kinds of organizations that over the course of the last 2 days demonstrate some of that capability. So whether it's the hot off the press IT sector that has capabilities, but boy, do we need to engage them properly into the contextual opportunities and guardrails of the food system, right? The energy sector, the finance sector, I talk a lot to the energy sector and describe the fact that when they send a market demand signal for green aluminum, they're dealing with 8 aluminum factories in the world. As soon as those 8 fix this, they're good. We have 600 million smallholder farmers in this world, and that's not even all the other farmers, right? So we just can't apply kind of blueprint examples from one transition to another, but we do need to engage these broader sectors into the nexus of both their stakes in this working and our stakes in this working. The second point around sort of non-business, I think those are the most important stakeholders to ensure are part of this. And I think as we think about the role of producers, farmers, fishers, and others, the role of early stage tech, maybe let me spend a few minutes on them because they are really fun to bring into the room. These are people working on the front line of some of the most complex challenges, and their barriers to scale are so steep, and they need so much support. They need confidence, coaching, capital, the enabling environment, the innovation policy nexus that helps upstart their programs into much more fit for purpose application. I mean, in Davos this year, we had through our Aquapreneur program this woman who has invented something that takes PFAS out of water. Right? We have such a huge water pollution in the places we're measuring, and by the way, we have it everywhere. We're just not measuring it everywhere. Those are the kinds of things that early startup can do, but they really need that support. So we're working deliberately with those different segments to really bring a constellation of capabilities and sort of creating rules of the game that everyone has a role to play, everyone has a responsibility, and then hopefully tapping into that with some of the smart examples already given in ways we haven't done before, because we do need to move faster.
So I want to throw a bit of a curveball. We haven't talked about it, but...
Ready. The Yankees just won. I'm in a good mood about curveballs. Let's do it.
That's too bad about the Yankees.
Oh, no. This just got not good.
No, not good, not good. So we're talking about great examples, and this is moving in the right direction, but let's face it, the market's also, creating a situation where, as you were mentioning, these cheap ingredients are going into the foods. We're seeing a proliferation of unhealthy foods. What can business really do? What's to level the playing field? Or what are your three companies doing to help drive forward better policy, or how do you view some of these market failures at the moment? And what, if you could just each in a few sentences say what you're doing to fix these market failures.
Okay, so first of all, we're not a company, but we do work with a lot of companies. And I would say one of the ways in which I've seen the sort of spirit of evolution rather than revolution on some of these issues is actually, and I see Lisa Sweet sitting there, so I'm going to pick on her, but there was this quite polarized alt protein versus classic protein conversation, which seems to have really evolved into a much more nuanced range of activities around diversified ingredients.
Right.
And that kind of framing, but also seat at the table for so many different options, are creating interest from venture capital, they're creating interest from the value chain of stakeholders, and I think just starting to work fast, fail fast, and start to create the kinds of opportunities that will result in outcomes dealing with some of those market failures, I think that's a really good direction. Will this be the next big bubble around this? It doesn't matter, because what matters is that we're innovating in a way that it helps benefit the producers and the consumers and doesn't forget about them.
Very good. Either of you would like to respond?
Yeah.
Yes?
Want
Valerie?
to go first?
So what
I will in a minute.
we really bet on innovation as well. So we take a huge risk to ensure that we have affordable and nice and delicious food in the whole planet.
Right.
So we really take big steps, and we really try to make an innovation that is end-end. So and reduce water and better taste. So we ask ourselves the impossible. That's and human connect. That's definitely the human connect is, and with the end consumer, but also with the people across the system. Yeah.
We de-risk innovation. So we have an entrepreneurial spirit as a part of our core community on this. So when you say market failure, we see opportunity, right? So then there's a lot of people in our community who see opportunity and to solve social problems with new technologies, et cetera. But when you put together the corporate executives who have the procurement power and can do offtake agreements with our leaders who are disruptive innovators, that also then is attractive for investors. So to help get through the valley of death on innovation is what we see as kind of an accelerator of the trusted relationships. So I remember post-Davos one year, the CEO of the Rise Fund asked for a follow-up meeting with me. And he said, Valerie, I'm about to hang up the phone and go in there and tell a alternative protein company no. And he said, it breaks my heart because I know it's part of the solution from a heart perspective, but I can't do it from an investment perspective. And he said, if I only knew that this company, these entrepreneurs, had access to just show what they're doing to your corporate leaders in your community, it would completely change my value proposition. I would go back in there and say yes instead of no. And I thought, oh my God, I know what a difference that makes to those entrepreneurs to get the yes or no from the Rise Fund, the impact investing, and we could solve that just by putting the right people together and by putting the right examples in front of each other. So I think that's an opportunity and a task for all of us as leaders to then say, how can we just put people together and say, you have capacity to buy, you have the new technologies or innovation, we have the investment capital, we have civil society activists who can help de-risk this, our farmers could use what you're producing if you're Arla. So it's about making this more concrete and more simple, and that is also a space of business. Business just kind of moves and gets things done. So we can do that as leaders as well.
Fantastic. So that brought us to time. I'll just summarize quickly. It's not about the moral responsibility, it's about the investment opportunity. We've heard actual
Can we
solutions.
say it's an and versus an or? Because I kind of disagree with John on that one.
All right. We can say that.
It's both.
But I think
Thank
if
you.
we're really going to fix the market, we have to think about this in the investment perspective.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody,
Well said.
for this.
Thank you, Greg.